All right, today we're going to pull back the curtain on a condition that affects millions of people, generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. We're going to talk about what it is, where it comes from, and most importantly, how it's managed. So let's dive in. Have you ever had that feeling? Like your brain has a worry switch and it's just stuck in the on position? It's like this constant, low-level hum of anxiety in the background, no matter what you're doing. Well, that feeling, that's really the heart of what we're talking about today. It's actually helpful to think of GAD as this sort of constant worry machine. This isn't just about feeling a little stressed out before a big meeting. No, this is when that state of worry becomes your default setting, that persistent hum that just runs under the surface of everything. The key words here are really excessive, uncontrollable, and persistent. We're not talking about your average, oh shoot, did I lock the door kind of worry. With GAD, the concern about totally normal everyday things like your job, your health, your family, it just feels way out of proportion, and trying to shut it off feels, well, impossible.
Okay, so let's put a more formal name to this feeling, because sometimes just understanding the clinical definition can be the first step to demystifying it, taking away some of its power.
The timeline here is absolutely crucial. This intense level of worry has to go on for at least 6 months. That's a huge part of what separates GAD from a temporary bout of anxiety. And notice the word generalized. The worry isn't about just one specific thing, like a fear of heights. It spreads out to cover all these different areas of life, creating that constant feeling that you're just waiting for the next bad thing to happen.
And mentally, being in that constant state of high alert, man, it takes a massive toll. People with GAD often talk about feeling perpetually restless, like they're always on edge. It's hard to focus on anything because your mind is always racing with all the what-ifs. And yeah, that can definitely lead to feeling irritable and having a brain that just automatically jumps to the worst-case scenario in pretty much any situation.
And this is where you really see that powerful connection between the mind and the body. That constant mental worry actually shows up as real physical symptoms. We're talking about tense muscles, a deep fatigue that sleep just doesn't seem to fix, headaches, stomach problems. Your body is basically stuck in this low-grade, constant state of fight or flight.
Now check out this statistic. It's pretty striking. GAD is diagnosed in women about twice as often as it is in men. Now, the reasons for this are really complex, and researchers are still digging into it. It's probably a mix of biological, social, and even how it's reported, but it's a really critical piece of the puzzle to understand.
So this brings us to a huge question. Where does all this worry come from in the first place? Why do some people develop GAD while others don't? Well, as you can probably guess, the answer is not that simple.
Yeah, there's no single anxiety gene you can point to, or one specific event that causes GAD. Instead, scientists call it multifactorial. The best way to think about it is like a recipe, with several key ingredients that all have to come together.
And we can basically group all those ingredients into 3 main categories that all carry about the same weight. Biological factors, which are things happening in our bodies. Psychological patterns, which are about how our minds work. And environmental influences from the world around us. So let's break those down a bit. Biologically, you might just have a genetic predisposition. Or you might have imbalances in key brain chemicals like GABA, which kind of acts like the brain's brakes, and serotonin, which helps regulate your mood. Then you've got the psychological piece, which can involve thought patterns, like having a really hard time with uncertainty or a habit of what's called catastrophic thinking. And finally, the environmental stuff. Things like chronic stress, past trauma, or big life changes can really set the stage for anxiety to take hold.
Okay, now for the most important part of this whole conversation. Understanding GAD is one thing, but knowing that it's manageable, that is everything. So let's look at the well-established ways to navigate this storm and find some relief. The 2 main evidence-based paths for managing GAD are therapy and medication. And it's not always an either-or kind of deal. In fact, for a lot of people, the most effective approach is a combination of both, tailored specifically to what they need. Cognitive behavioral therapy, you'll hear it called CBT, is very often the first-line psychological treatment, and that's because it's so practical and skills-based. It's really all about learning to become a detective of your own thoughts, first identifying those unhelpful patterns, then challenging them to see if they're actually true, and then actively practicing new ways of coping with worry.
So, on the other side of the coin, you have medication, which works more on the biological level. The goal here is to help rebalance those neurotransmitters we were just talking about. It's kind of like turning down the volume on the brain's overactive alarm system, which can give therapy and other coping skills a much better chance to work effectively. This table gives us a great little overview. Doctors will often start with meds like SSRIs or SNRIs. Those are the first-line options for long-term treatment. But I want you to notice the note on that bottom row for short-term options, like benzodiazepines. See where it says used with caution? That's because while they can give you relief pretty quickly, they also carry a risk of dependence, so they're definitely not a long-term solution.
So what does the future actually look like for someone with GAD? Well, the path forward isn't about getting rid of worry completely. I mean, that's just not possible for any human. It's about learning to live with it in a new way, a way where it no longer controls your life.
This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. GAD is often a chronic condition. That means it can be a long-term part of someone's life. But, and this is the most important word on the screen, it is manageable. With the right tools, with the right support, people absolutely can and do live full, wonderful lives.
And this is where daily life comes into play. Treatment isn't just about what happens in a doctor's office. All these strategies, these are powerful tools for managing symptoms day to day. Seriously, things as simple as getting some regular exercise, making sure you get enough sleep, and practicing mindfulness can make a huge difference in keeping that worry machine in check.
So we'll end with this question for you to think about. Whether this topic is personal for you or maybe it's for someone you care about, remember that understanding is always the first step. So what's one small, manageable step you can take today, not tomorrow, but today, for your own mental well-being? Sometimes that single step is the most important one you'll ever take.